Hello and welcome to the Still Standing series. I'm your host, Coach Violet Coots, and I'm happy to have my special guest with me today, John Oldham. I'm Christian life coach, equipping and empowering individuals to live in the freedom and the true identity that God created us in and for. So I'd love for you to grab my free biblical affirmation cards so that you can start renewing your mind today and start living in that freedom. And if you're feeling stuck in any way, then schedule a free call with me. I'd be glad to speak with you. That link will be in the show notes. Hi, John.
Hey, Violet,
How are you?
doing good.
Good, good. So I am so just thankful and honored to have you on here with me today. And we've talked, you've shared a good bit of your testimony. And so I know it's going to be encouraging for a lot of people and even resources and things that you have that you'll probably share with us. But just, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into your testimony.
I'm John Oldham and currently live in Jacksonville, Florida. 57 years old, and so I'm getting on up there a little bit. And spent, for work. I'm retired now, but working wise, I spent 28, almost 29 years in law enforcement. So majority of my adult life, and so yeah, it's there's a lot there, a lot before I got into the profession, a lot that happened during it, relationship wise, marriages, and a lot of challenges. And probably the key thing is that the Lord never stepped away from me, although I did from Him for quite a while. And so we're back in that. I'm back in that season now to where I'm just kind of trying to do what He would have me to do.
Oh, that's wonderful. And those words are true for all of us that the Lord doesn't step away from us. Sometimes we step away from Him. And I've gone through those seasons in my life as well, but He's always there. And I know just from our previous conversation, that I feel like what He's brought you through though is now, He's using every bit of that and, for His glory in there. So, uh, go ahead. And I know you and I talked, when John and I talked, it was like, this might be a little bit longer, session, which, than normal, but that's okay because, I don't like to cut anybody off and give you a time limit on your testimony because this is your story, God's story in your life. And, I believe it is very, very needed and will be very beneficial to others as well. So I'm going to just kind of give this over to you and let you share.
So probably first thing I'll tell you is that the first time I told my story was not too long ago. It was just back in 2014. So it's only been about 11 years. I had withheld that for the longest time period because there was probably a lot of shame and maybe a little bit of guilt in it. And it was just kind of something that was maybe embarrassing at the same time. But 2014, and then I'll go back to the beginning. My wife said, "Hey, there's we lived like 30 miles from our church at that point in time, and she really wanted to build some community here and in our area where we live at. And she found a small group about 2 miles away, and they were just starting up. They were all going to a different church, and she said, "I'm going to go. Would you like to go with me?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And I said, "You go right ahead." But it was for couples, and so she did go that first session, and she came back and she said, I think you would enjoy this." And I said, "I probably won't." And she said, "Well, will you just go once and go with me?" And that was kind of convicting because, last thing I wanted to do is my wife had to be show up to a married couples group, and she's by herself, and they're like, "Where's your husband?" And, for her to have to say, well, he's kind of being difficult and not coming over. But so I did. I think it was the second meeting they had, and they kind of talked about the journey they were going to go down, and it was Andy Stanley's North Point Ministries community program, and I'd never heard of it before. But there was the key component in it was that um, people were going to tell their stories. That was going to be the main component of that, and that was going to happen, in the middle of it after a few sessions. And so I was extremely nervous and hesitant. When I got back home, I prayed about it for quite some time. And what really came out of that was the Lord said, it's time. And I was like, okay. So when it came our turn, fortunately, we heard everybody else's. We were the last couple to go, one of the last two couples on the same night. And, they had been so transparent with their stories. I asked the Lord, I was like, how much do you want me to tell? He said, I want you to tell it all. He said, because, somebody's going to need to hear your story, and didn't know who that might be. And it actually wasn't that, in that group that somebody in that group needed to hear my story. It was after, so
Mhm.
he got me to tell it the first time, and then it's kind of, there's been instances since then, quite a few of them where opportunities have come up and people's like, hey, can you share? And there was internal hesitation, but I said, you know what, I got to get stretched a little bit, and I'm just going to share it. And so that's happened quite a bit. So so I've only been telling that for a little while, in some interesting places, including a marriage intensive in 2019 when we were trying to save our marriage. So it's kind of been the full gamut from one end of the spectrum to the other. But so going back, growing up, I grew up in a household where the Lord wasn't present. I don't recall anybody, you know, um, even having an interest in it. So if I went to church, it was usually getting invited by a neighbor's kid, my age, or later on in life, a coworker, when I was able to drive. Once I turned 16, he invited me to go to church. But so as far as practicing Christian, I probably became the first one in our household. And it wasn't, I count my dad he's passed away now, but my opinion is that he was pretty much an atheist. He didn't, believe anything about, God, the existence of God, or
Mhm.
his kind of mindset was that everything that you want, you have to earn it, and you control your destiny no matter what it is. So I was kind of afraid of that, plus the fact that when I was about, I think it was about 11 or 12, I started noticing some instability in the house between my mom and dad, and it kind of came out that he was having an affair with a coworker. What I didn't know until later was that the other lady actually lived not too far from where we did in our community. And so once that came out, I actually had to ride the bus. Our bus route went through her neighborhood, and so her two sons
Oh,
would actually get on the bus after I did, um, and they kind of harassed me quite a bit about, my dad would be at their house and doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing, places he wasn't supposed to be. So I don't know that I ever disclosed that or if my mom knew that, but that was, pretty embarrassing for other kids to watch it. And I think as I've gone through life, that had a really significant impact on, my development emotionally, and being able to, have healthy relationships with other people. So, but I did have an interest. I believe that, uh, God was probably out there. I just didn't know what it looked like. And I used to sneak down into the basement. This is back when you had to turn the dial on the television for your channels. And we were in Atlanta at the time. And so on Sundays, I would sneak down to the basement and watch episodes of Dr. Charles Stanley at First Baptist Church of Atlanta.
wow.
And so during one of those commercials, they were advertising, I think it was the DeMoss Foundation or Buckingham, or somebody was advertising a free copy of a book called Power for Living. And so after I saw that quite a few times, I took the risk and ordered the book, and just kind of hoped that I would get the mail before my dad did. And sure enough, I got it. And then it was about 1984, I think. And reading through the book, I really got a better understanding about God, and He had a plan for me, and that my purpose was centered based on how He defined me, not other people. That He would be the cornerstone if I would just accept Jesus into my life. And so that happened in 1984. I didn't tell anybody about it, but I felt free of a lot of things, and just things were unstable at home and unstable at school. We had moved, I think, two or three times during that time period. So I went from a school that I was established in to a school in Savannah, Georgia, and then 9 months later back to Atlanta to a different school, and it was between middle school and high school. And
Wow.
so I had zero connections. And so this book kind of really helped me see that what I needed more than anything was the Lord. And it's kind of funny because I still have it, and
Wow.
you can see the binders are all bent up and cut up and everything. But I've kept that book as a reminder of where it all started. But so went through high school, really nothing outstanding at it. I was really looking forward to getting out of high school so I could figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And fortunately, during that time period when I was junior and senior in high school, I befriended a person when I was working at Winn-Dixie, a grocery chain here in the Southeast back then. And he was 1 year older than me, went to a different high school, but very much a Christian, very much had a family background that was similar to mine, to where it's not really healthy. And so he would invite me to church, and so we became extremely close. I got baptized at his church. We used to sing, in a choir together and did all kinds of things. And so, but then in 1988, kind of things came to a head. My dad was still doing what he was doing, and him and I had kind of just a conflict. My mom was in the hospital for surgery, and after he dropped her off with us there, he went to her house, the other lady's house, and was gone all night long. And so I pretty much had enough of it the next morning when he came home, and um, he was complaining about the house being dirty, and I just kind of lost it. And I just said, there's probably some things that I can't repeat. I get struck by lightning, but he actually charged at me, and we had a physical altercation. And so when it was over, I kind of realized that may be the separation point with me and my dad, and that things would never really be the same. And so it wasn't long after that my mom got a promotion at her job, and her and my brother moved to Jacksonville, and I kind of went in between back and forth for a little bit. And I think that situation with me and my father really had a lot to do with it, because he was trying to force me to leave Atlanta. He would want me to meet him for dinner, and was pressuring me to go, and really trying to control my life as a young adult. And I think during that time period, I pretty much gave up on everything, including the Lord, and I walked away from the church. And I was gone from that for quite a while. And in 1993, I decided, I'm out doing my own thing, and not, I'm going to make my own decisions. It was really kind of following back to my dad's kind of mentality on things, as far as you control everything in your life. And so I went to the police academy. I don't think many people in my family were really excited about that, and became a police officer, and moved. I moved to Gainesville, Florida. So I was truly out on my own at that point in time. Was dating a girl who turned out to be my first wife, and we were in just a unhealthy relationship for like 10 years. And during that time, living together, and during that time period, I was working on the midnight shift, and not realizing the detriment that working for 5+ years on the midnight shift was doing to me, psychologically, and also to my physical health. And plus, just the way the job is, it's extremely easy to become cynical pretty fast. And that's really what happened. There was this just kind of gradual drift and decline, and it became this whole us against the world mentality type of thing in policing. And so I think my first wife, we weren't married yet, but she had pretty much had enough of it, because we certainly weren't fulfilling each other's needs, and the Lord wasn't in the picture. And so she eventually moved to Tampa, and I was like, well, then why am I staying here in Gainesville? I'd always want to be back in Jacksonville at the sheriff's office, or at least try to have a career there. And so I did. I moved and came back to Jacksonville. But somehow we ended up in Jacksonville together, and started, trying to patch things up together, and decided that the best thing to do is to get married. We've been dating for all this time. Let's just get married. That'll fix it all. And it sure did. It fixed it because we got married and less than a year later, it was over. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it was total kind of disaster, meltdown for me because now here I was back at nothing. And so I remember a classmate that got hired with me at the sheriff's office knew what was going on. He had been at my wedding the year before, and he said, "I know you think that you can climb out of this hole yourself, but actually what you need is less of the world and more of the Lord." And so he invited me to come to their church, and I think that was on like a Thursday, and he invited me for Sunday morning service, but I just felt this pull that I couldn't wait until Sunday. So I found out they had a Saturday night service, and I went to it by myself. And I remember sitting in like the fifth row, way off to the side, and just lost it. And just I prayed out to the Lord, and I said, "I am in the deepest hole that I've ever been in my life, and I know that I cannot get myself out of it. That only you can help me to do that." And so, I made a commitment that if, you know, kind of bargaining with the Lord, that was like, if you do this, I promise I'll do whatever you want me to do, not really understanding that that wasn't how it worked. But he did. One of the best advice from a mentor of mine was going through that time period was he said that um, if you're truly going to allow the Lord to do what he wants to do for your life, then you've got to stand still and quit getting in his way and take your hands off of it. Well, being a police officer and, the way, I grew up, everything was the safest place for me psychologically was to try to control every situation.
Right.
And so that was hard, but it was the first time I'd ever just stood still because my hope was that the Lord would restore the marriage. And after about a month and a half went by, maybe two, I woke up one morning and I felt him tell me that um, it's okay, and it's okay for you to file for the divorce. And which was kind of strange because I had no intentions of filing for it. If my ex-wife wanted to divorce me, then I expected that she would file for it. But the Lord was like, "No, it's okay. You should file for it." And it's almost like He was giving me permission to do it. And so I did. Felt extreme relief. However, I was in therapy, trying to figure out how to recover from the emotional trauma of that, all of that. Got some really bad advice from more than a few therapists, and
Yeah.
one of them finally, the last one, just said, "I've seen you so many times. The best thing I think that you can do is just go start dating again." And it was less than a year after the divorce, but I was like, well, you're the professional. So I did that, and it was really bad because it just, none of the traumas or the things that had happened in the relationship had, been worked through or addressed. You had all these things that happened on the job over that time period because by then it was 2005 or 2006, and I'd been in the profession for almost 11 years. So I was carrying around all this baggage,
Right.
not knowing what to do with it. So dated for a little bit, decided after another bad breakup, I said, something's wrong here. And fortunately, the Lord eventually led me to my current wife. And we met online. It was through eHarmony, which everybody's like, no way. Um, but we took it slow. She was in California assisting her grandparents. At the time, they were a little bit older, and the grandmother was being moved into assisted living. So we communicated by email for a month. Never called each other, just email back and forth. We were destined to take this thing slow and not rush into anything. And then when she finally came back to Jacksonville, we met up at Chili's, and she was sick, and so I ate dinner. She had water or tea or something like that, and we just kind of started dating from that point on. But even because of all the things that had happened in my past and bad relationships and bad endings, I still was pretty distant because I think I'd been hurt enough, or at least felt hurt enough, that I didn't want to get hurt again. And
Right.
so it was probably 9 months because we first started communicating in December of 2006. And I think it was in October of 2007 that the Lord spoke to me. And I didn't know, my wife, she was really like, I don't know if I want to stay dating this guy because he's so distant. I found this out later. And I think my mom had told her, just hold on, hang on for, a little bit longer. And the Lord in October, October 2007, just one day said, "This is the person that I have um, uh, for you," which I'd
Wow.
never heard before. And just I started looking at her in a different light, and um, I didn't understand it because I was still hurting from my past. And so I told the Lord, I was like, "Hey, you're going to have to tell me what you want me to do here. As far as, do you want me to just keep dating? Do you, want me to propose? Do you, all those things?" Because in the past, I'd made those decisions,
Right.
and I was like, I can't do that anymore. And so he did. He started opening doors that were like for a future with her. And we went out to see her grandparents because my wife's mom died when she was 16. Her dad died when she was about 22. So her grandparents were kind of her parents, for lack of a better term. And so we went out to see them in November of 2007. And I just felt like the Lord was like, on that trip, was like, "You need to ask your grandfather if he would give his blessing for you to get married to her." And so I was like, "That's impossible." And so I thought it was just, I was the enemy was speaking to me and saying something, and so I didn't do anything. And then I think it was the second to the last night we were there with them. Um, we were walking to dinner, and I was in the very back. My wife was with her grandmother, and I was behind her grandfather. And I just felt the Lord saying, "Now's the time. Ask now." And so I did. I went up, walked up to him, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "I know this is out of nowhere, but I just, I just feel like now's the time I'm supposed to ask you this. Would you um, give your blessing for me to marry her?" And he said, without hesitation, he's like, "Absolutely. I think you're a fine young man," and all those kind of things. And so the Lord just kind of unfolded all those things. And so we got engaged on Valentine's Day, that's coming up, 2008, and got married that October. And, we went to premarital. We were like, we're getting married in the church. We're going to have pastor marry us. We're going to do all the right things. But I think the thing that we uh, didn't realize is we were really just checking the boxes on a
Mm,
checklist. And
gotcha.
so, she had all those traumas in her past that I wasn't completely aware of, and she wasn't either. And so, once we got married and we became a blended family, she had a son who was about 12, and I've never had any kids. And so everything seemed to be fine. And then 1 month after the wedding, I got into a fatal shooting on duty.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, I'd been a hostage negotiator before that for several years in Gainesville, and had worked suicide prevention crisis lines before that. And so I told my wife, I was like, "Here's the things that we need to look out for in my behavior. I'll try to do that, but if you see them and I don't, then we need to address it." Um, but my PTSD did not manifest itself right then. It actually was delayed and didn't show up until about 6 months later. And it came out into very controlling behaviors. And, literally, I mean, going all the way back to my old coping skills when I was younger. And so it became where we couldn't go to certain restaurants because I just knew too much about what had happened there, or with criminal activity, or, with her son, it was like, anytime he wanted to go hang out with friends, it would be like, "Well, do you know the parents? What do you know about them?" It's like an interrogation.
Right.
And I didn't realize I was doing it. And so our marriage started down a 4-year time period where we thought we're not going to make it. And so it was probably the worst 4 years. Well, there was something happened later, but 4 years that we really thought we're going to get divorced. And fortunately, my wife had still been going back to see the pastor that married us because he had made us promise during premarital that even after we were married, that we would stay connected with him. And once I fell into back into the old habits, I didn't stay connected. I didn't want to stay connected, and I didn't really understand what was happening to me. But she did, and he told her finally after several meetings that and I didn't I knew she was going sometimes, but not all the times. But he basically told her that I was just being a bully, and it was an accurate statement. And probably in one of our very last big fights, the only time that she ever put her stuff in her car and left the house, which totally triggered my control coping mechanism. Um, and she eventually came back home, but we couldn't talk to each other. And it was so bad in our house that when her son and I would pass through even a single doorway, we wouldn't even acknowledge each other's presence. And so this went on for 4 years. But after she came back home and things kind of calmed down a little bit, and we realized we've got to actually talk, was when she told me that every night, because I was still working on the night shift, she said, every night when you go to work, I curl up in the bathroom floor and I just cry.
Oh, wow.
And I was the best gaslighter there was. I learned that from my father. But in that moment, there was nothing that I could say to contradict that. It was like getting a slap in the face. And for the first time, because my dad would never admit to being wrong about anything. But for the first time in that marriage, I realized I did that.
Mm.
I caused that. And so we decided at that point that as much as we had checked all the boxes about getting married right the correct way, that we needed to try to start learning how marriage, especially a Christian marriage, is supposed to look like and what that actually means. And so we started connecting with resources and doing research, and the more that we did that, things started to change. And then we started having other couples, and some of them first responder couples were like, "Hey, we're struggling. We know that you were struggling. How did you start making progress?" And so we started sharing. It really wasn't. We weren't trying to counsel anybody. We were just trying to share information and knowledge that we had. Um, but looking back on it, we really feel like the Lord did that on purpose. And I couldn't understand why until I thought way back to 2005 when I got divorced. I was standing in the shower. My first wife had been gone for, I don't know, 2 months. And the emotional pain was just unbearable. And I was just crying in the shower. And I cried out to the Lord and I said, I get it that she's probably not coming back, but why does this hurt so much? And it was the first time that he had ever spoken to me clearly. And he said, I don't want you to forget this pain, because if you do, you won't do with it what I need for you to do later.
Mm.
And so I didn't know what that meant until 9 years later, 8 or 9 years later. And so here we were, helping couples walk through seasons that we were just a little bit further ahead than they were.
Yeah.
And so, and we thought, we're doing okay. And that, we were recovering and getting better. And we had been um, helping couples for like 6 years. But what we didn't realize was that um, we started getting so busy helping others and serving in the church that we stopped investing in us. And so
Yeah.
we slid from being that top priority, second only to the Lord, to way down below. And it started with, serving in the church one Sunday a month and then helping couples with their relationships the rest of the time, to serving in church 3 times a month and every Sunday. And so we weren't being fed unless we
Right.
watched the message, online, the replay of it. And so, um, I'd never really believed in spiritual attacks. I thought, I believe the Bible, I believe in the Lord, I believe in Jesus, believe in all that. I don't really truly believe in spiritual attacks. I think it's kind of a hokey thing. And then in 2019, it actually happened. The enemy saw where we had slid into that space. He saw a crack, and he literally forced into that crack. And within a matter of months, our marriage went from, literally 6 months, our marriage went from being pretty good to being dead in the water.
Wow.
And then there was, infidelity happened during that time period. And so we found ourselves in a situation that, if you said, how did this happen? And so one of the key things that we decided to do was to go back and basically um, autopsy what had happened.
Wow.
And so we did that. We were fortunate to have been previously connected a year before to an executive director that runs a marriage intensive in Texas and in Georgia. And that was something the Lord had set up, that connection. We thought, I thought that was just going to be something, another tool to help couples. But it actually turned out He was preparing the way, because we were going to need that. And so we went to the intensive in 2019. We learned so many things about how our past, uh, things that were unresolved, that they affect you in your current relationships, in your home, in your marriage, in parenting, how you do things, how you communicate, and the reasons why you don't communicate. But coming home from that, that was probably the most intense time period for our marriage. But for a year after that, we really didn't know if we were going to make it. But we committed that we were going to do whatever the Lord wanted us to do in that situation. And me personally, I wanted out, because I was like, I don't want to go through another, you know, trying to resolve, save something. And but that's when the Lord told me, he came to me right before the intensive, and said, you don't have clean hands here. And I didn't know what he was getting at. And I was doing yard work at the time, and I just stopped and closed my eyes, and this word that he gave me was thirst. And I thought he was talking about me thirsting. And it actually was the opposite. He said, you're supposed to be the leader in your house and in your marriage, but you haven't done that. You've led your wife into the desert, and you've basically abandoned her there.
Well,
And so um, it was another one of those moments, like when she told me about crying in the bathroom floor, and I was like, I can't, I couldn't gaslight her then. I can't gaslight the Lord when He's telling me this now. And so it just brought me to my knees. And so um, my commitment, that was right before the intensive, was, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. And if it's for me, or for us to stay in this marriage and do the work, then that's what we'll do. And and so my wife committed the same thing. But the wildest part about it was is that when we came back home, we didn't. We took a whole year off. Told the pastors, we're like, we're not doing anything. We've got to get ourselves healthy again.
Right.
But when we did come back into it, um, I'd mentioned, there was infidelity in that situation. But the wildest part is that prior to us going through that season, we had not worked with or had been sent any couples to work with that had infidelity in their picture, in the marriage or anything. After we started back up, every single couple except for one that was sent to us, and we didn't know it in most cases, had some kind of infidelity in the picture. And so
Wow.
some of them actually disclosed it several sessions in for the first time. And in some cases, the other spouse did not even know it. And
Wow.
so, when you look at that, that's like the Lord's plan. Uh,
I sort of say, if you can't see God like all over this, oh my goodness. Wow.
and
Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
that's okay. Because it takes your breath away, because it's
Mhm.
like, in our human minds, we're like, oh, God wants us to stay together, then this must be what he wants us to do. And he's like, no, you don't have any idea.
Yeah.
Just stand back and watch. And so, so now here we are, and we don't have we still we're still a lot of couples coming forward for assistance, not so much about infidelity, but we've been able to help some of those couples to walk through the season. Some of them, and it's totally the Lord. It's not us. We're just His vessel for doing it. But they've saved their own marriages with His help. And so, but almost all of them were more surprised that my wife and I, didn't have a reaction when it came up. And it was like, you're not shocked? And we're like, no, because we've already been down this. And the reason why that's important is because when we were going through that season of trying to save our marriage in 2019, the Lord put a whole circle of people around us. Most of them weren't even local. Our one-to-one mentor couple during that time period actually was in Dallas, Texas. And so that was a connection that had been made a year earlier as well. Uh, Similar to connecting with the intensive executive director. And so is a former retired police chief. So him and I, kind of had a connection there that way.
Right.
Um, but the interesting thing about how the Lord set that up was, I reached out to him immediately and said, "Here's what's going on," and he says, "What an amazing opportunity!" And I thought, "You have lost your mind."
Right.
Um, but he was exactly right. And so he walked alongside me for several months, and his wife walked alongside my wife for several months. And then I think it was maybe 6 months into it that he told me something that shocked me to my core. He said that we've been what you're going through, but the roles were reversed.
Mm.
And I was like, holy cow! This whole time, um, my wife and I have been getting mentored by the people who were, whether you want to call them suspect or victims, the reverse. And because they had walked through it and the Lord had helped them to restore it, now we're getting it from both sides of the coin. And so that, I mean, you can't make
It
those
just gave
things
me
up.
chills. It's like, wow.
And so, that was probably the hardest, second hardest. We had those first 4 years, and then that season that went through it. But since that point in time, I finally got out of law enforcement. It just got to be too much, and retired from that. But the Lord had been pressing on me for probably a year before I left. He's like, I have something else for you to do, and I think you should go ahead and retire. And I was like, this is definitely from the enemy, because I'm not ready to retire, or I don't think it's the right time to retire. But finally, I woke up one morning in November 2022, and he said, today's the day. And it was a Tuesday. And so I had already typed my letter, because I just didn't had the dates were blank. And so I filled it in. I took it to the director who was over HR, and he said, "Are you sure about this?" And I thought, here's my out. I can say, "Nah, give me that back. I'll wait a little bit longer." But in that moment, I thought, am I going to trust me or am I going to trust the Lord? And so I said, "Yeah, that's it." And so that was a Tuesday. I didn't even give it 2 weeks notice. I told him, I said, "This Friday's my last day," and I walked out the door. And
Wow.
not really knowing what the Lord had in store, but it turned out to be that um, our pastors kind of had an idea, or not really an idea, but they had a desire to build on what we had already been doing in the church with helping couples, and put together a true relationship ministry program to where people, whether it's from our church or any church in the community or anywhere, could have a place, that a connection point to where when people didn't know what to do with their situations, whether it's marriage, parenting, dating, divorce, infidelity, you name it, because we'd already been through everything in that gamut, then they could reach out to us, and we could get them connected. And so we didn't know what that was going to look like, had no idea, but it was a season to where it went all the way back to 2005, to where the Lord would show me images of what it was going to look like, or at least that's what I thought. But what he was really trying to teach me was to be patient and don't touch anything or do anything with it until he told me to. And so, me being extra controlling,
Right.
the last couple of years, I've had to literally learn to be hands off. Some things he's shown me, and they've never come to pass. Some things he's shown me, and I'm like, oh, I know what this is going to be, and it's turned out to be something totally different. And so, through this whole process, we created a nonprofit. It's called the Bridge Relationship Center, and our whole goal is to we just don't want couples or people falling through the cracks. And so we know that some people are like me in the past. They don't want professional help. They're not interested in professional help, but they'll be glad to look at resources if you give them to them. And so we created a Facebook page that is merely nothing but a collection of relationship, marriage, parenting, mental health and wellness, divorce, recovery resources from content providers, vetted ones, most of them Christian, and we put them in one place on that page so that people can go there whenever they want to, whatever time of the day it is. Nobody knows they're there. And there's more than 15,000 pieces of information in there now that you can word search it and find resources. And we post about probably 120, 125 new items a week, all on a
Wow.
schedule. So people can at least have something they can at least get information on. If they're looking for professional help, we will help them find somebody, because there was a study, I think it was in the Journal of Psychology or something, that came out in 2018, where they did research on low-income couples, married couples that knew that they needed help, but they never got it, and they really wanted to know why. And the top two reasons kind of told us that this ministry, or whatever you want to call it, we're doing it for the right reasons. The first one was cost, and we get it. Things cost money. But the second one was that top reasons for couples was that they didn't know where to look. And so when we saw that, we were like, this is definitely what the Lord wants us to be doing. And so, so what we do is, if a couple says, hey, we're looking for a therapist, we don't know where to look, Google's got a million of them, we don't want to get a bad one. We've got a short list of connections here locally in Jacksonville that I've literally met with the therapist one-on-one to determine, what's their methodologies. Do they put couples on a plan, or a person on a plan, so that they can try to help them get self-sufficient? All those kind of things. And so, but also nationally, if somebody reaches out, and this happened, somebody reached out from New York State and said, hey, here's my situation. we don't know where to look. And so I would, tell them, how much information can you share? Do you need a provider that will take your insurance or is not an issue? And then within an hour, find them 5 providers within 10 miles of their location, that at least through the information you can find on the website, on the provider's websites, that you can say with some degree of certainty, this might be a good match specifically for your situation. Not sending them to a general counselor for a marriage issue, finding them literal marriage counselors that whether they're Gottman certified or trained, and then getting that list of 5 to 10 providers back to them quickly as possible, and telling them, hey, these are some options for you to start with. If they don't work, let us know. We'll find you more. It may be further away or it may be a virtual option, but we will keep looking until we find something that works for you. And so we take the cost and time factor out of it, and we don't charge anything for doing the research. They'll have to pay the provider, but at least, when they're in crisis, we don't want them to give up hope and say, just throw their hands up. And so we do that. And then, some other things that we work on is we do support marriage mentors and coaches that are actually doing the work with what's called collaboration calls. And that is primarily like a marriage mentor couple has a couple that they're just like, we're kind of running into a brick wall with this one and we're not sure what to do with it. And in larger churches, we found that pastoral staff is not always readily available for you to come meet with them about every issue that a couple's having. And so people can reach out to us through our website, and set up what we call a collaboration call. And we literally we don't have the answers, but what we do is we try to brainstorm things that might be a possibility or an angle for them to approach to help those couples. And we do that for free as well, because we want to make sure that we support the people that are actually doing the work. So it's really this multiplication thing that the Lord is just kind of, and we didn't come up with these ideas, He did. And it was through things that have been brought up, meeting with people, like, here's a need, we don't know how to meet it, and praying about it is like, okay, Lord, is this something you want us to do anything with, or is this just something there for us to be thinking about? And when He says to pull the trigger, then that's what we do. But we've been fortunate to put together a really good advisory board. In addition to our board of directors, the advisory board is they really give us feedback on, here's what we're working on, what do y'all think about it? But their biggest thing is they always come back around and say, all that stuff is good, it's helpful, it's necessary, but what are you and your wife doing to stay healthy? And so they really hold us accountable in that respect. And so it's really been a good thing. So we're still on the journey, but I think probably the thing about it is that looking back on it, all through all of it, I got asked a couple of months ago, what would you say about all that? Is that if you trust in the Lord, all those things, bad things can happen, good things can happen, but in those valleys, hang on tight. Hold on to the hem of the garment and know that He is faithful, and that although the outcome may not be the way we thought it was going to be or that we want it to be, it will definitely be better, His outcome, than the one that I would come up with. So I think that's probably the shortest version of from beginning to now of where I've been.
Wow. That's a lot, but it's, I'm sitting here thinking this is real life. And this is what, I feel like the Still Standing, this podcast is about, is for people to see the reality of it, and really walking out life, walking out our Christian life, walking out the ups and the downs, and and that being able to share, and in being transparent. And man, the resources that that y'all are doing and stuff like that, it's like that's amazing. I'm just amazed. I was like, whoa, I don't even know what to say, because again, from the beginning, from the end of that. And, seeing God's hand, through the whole thing, seeing God's hand when you were young. I mean, he was obviously drawing and you were listening, whether, and stuff, because he banks us with that whole, this he can feel. And I just think about all the times that you could have thrown in the towel completely and you didn't. And, and I think that's one thing I like about the Bible, is that it gives us the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when we really take time to think about it, it's not the quick fixes. It's not, things would happen over periods of times, over years, and staying steadfast, in that. And I think, that's something that we have to learn and maybe relearn or something like that, because I say, we live in this microwave and drive through window world, and it's like we think, oh, or we read the Bible and it's on this page, it says this, the next verse is, and it's like, well, wait a minute, there's years between that time frame. But wow, thank you for sharing this. I think, again, I think it's much needed. I think, I hope that a lot of people see this, and I know that God will get the ones that need to, and stuff. And I've even thought, as you were sitting here talking, it's like, oh, there's a couple of people I need to make sure they know about you, about, y'all's a nonprofit, and even to hear, your testimony and stuff, which is all part of it. But again, I do appreciate you being here. I typically ask, I typically ask if there is a life verse that you kind of had throughout your life. I know some people have them and some don't, and it's not a right or wrong answer. But do you feel like you've had a life verse, or sometimes they're seasonal too?
Yeah, it probably came about during the time I was working in law enforcement, because uh, I was very disgruntled about things. There were some, probably the last 10 years of my career, I was in roles that I didn't really like, but I had been asked to take them for obvious, reasons. And so the verse that I had to really hang on to during those times was Colossians 3:23, which is, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not human masters. And so I would literally, especially those mornings when I would show up to the office and I was like, I do not want to be here at all today. I would have to read that verse a handful of times before starting the day. And it was my constant reminder. And it's still the
Mm.
same now, is because um, in the work that we're doing, now with families and couples, it's all about Him. It's all about trying to help them to have hope and realize that they're not going to get it from the world,
Yeah.
that it's only going to come from Him, and that for those people that we work with that maybe don't know Him, that they'll have the opportunity to come to know Him as well.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Thank you. Thank you. And you kind of shared a little bit, but I'll still go ahead and ask my other question that I typically ask. But knowing what you know now, knowing what you know now and everything you've been through, what advice or encouragement, would you like to leave, the audience with?
Probably the encouragement would be that it's never too late. And the Lord always leaves the door open.
Yeah.
He's always waiting there. He'll knock. We may not hear it, but that's because of ourselves. Um, but that door is always open. It doesn't matter how long you've been gone away from it. He is literally waiting there, and it's not with judgment. And I think that is a dangerous place in the church right now, is that people feel like they either can't come to the church or they can't come back to the church
Yeah.
or to the Lord, because there's going to be judgment there. And so I think that's probably the big one, is that it's not too late and the door is still open even now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So good. So true. And so true. Well, again, I thank you for being here with us and for taking the time and sharing all that you've shared. I'll have again your contact information and resource information in the description so that people can reach out to you and look up your Facebook page and things like that, because it sounds like that's an awesome resource. Um, and I'm just gonna again, I'll say thank you. I always close with the promise. I think it's a promise that if we find it in Isaiah 43:2, and that just says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall be burned. You shall not be burned. Sorry, nor shall the flames scorch you." And again, that's God saying He's there through all of it. So if this episode has been encouraging to you, please like and share, and please do share this. Maybe there's somebody that this can be an encouragement to. Leave a comment, share it with a friend. And just as a reminder, if you're feeling stuck in any way, then or confused in your walk with God, go ahead and schedule a free call with me, because I'd be glad to, talk to you, because God does not want you to be stuck or confused. So until next time, have a great day.